This week's show brought to you by Aaron Gordon's Dunks. Seriously, they need to turn the scale to 11. Welcome back to another Box Score Geek show. It's the All-Star break, but don't worry, we still have fun stuff to discuss, even though as of this taping, I don't think much that actually matters in the NBA has happened, Brian. I'm your host, Andres Alvarez, aka Nerd Numbers. With me is my co-host and producer, Brian Foster. You can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Give a shout out, Brian.
What's up, Dre? And yeah, I guess we got a couple more days until the games start up again. The real games, anyway. We'll talk about the All-Star game. Man, it's just not as intense. I'm not quite as into it, but I did like your comment in the during the intro there. Are you saying Aaron Gordon should have gotten straight 55s for that great dunk?
So you're jumping ahead. Actually, let's make that our first topic.
Okay,
so anyway,
okay.
We're going to talk the All-Star game and some trades in the NBA, and then more to the point, some kind of trade speculations and my thoughts on general flaws in thinking about how teams think about buyers and sellers at the trade deadline. So first topic, let's start with Aaron Gordon. So if you've been on Twitter and are a basketball fan, you have seen the Aaron Gordon dunk, where he basically, what's the name of the mascot of the Magic? Stupid, crazy-looking green thing is what I would call it if I was naming mascots.
I don't know, personally.
No one on this show, we're not Magic fans. Shocker.
Looks like a triceratops or a dragon, maybe? I'm not sure.
Yeah, if you're in the comments section and you want to tell us the name of, the Magic mascot, neither Brian or I know. We are Aaron
Get off
Gordon.
my lawn, too, Dre. Get off my lawn. That's how
we
old
are Aaron Gordon fans, though, because, as we mentioned, you would have had him in the All-Star game legit, not just the dunk contest. But if you were on Twitter, you would assume that Aaron Gordon won the dunk contest because that dunk where he jumps over the mascot's head, a fun article, I don't know if it was Vox or 538, one of those sites, said he jumped high enough that he would have placed gold in the or not gold, bronze. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to overhype you, Aaron Gordon.
It was Steve Goldstein or Goldstein from ESPN tweeted this out, and I think it might have been from Sports Science on ESPN. Anyway, continue, Dre.
You were on the ball. None of us knew the mascot's name, but you were on the ball with that. That is the type of show we are. We don't know the names of mascots for NBA teams, but we apparently know the quick links to NBA science. But anyway, he would have placed bronze in the Olympic with that high jump where he jumps over the mascot's head, grabs the ball, double hand puts it beneath his legs, and then I don't know if it's a reverse dunk. I'm not even remembering it right. Amazing dunk. I've seen that on my Twitter feed nonstop, and so I was shocked when he didn't win the slam dunk contest, and I would have assumed that dunk just means you win. I think I even listened to the commentary. I forget which of the commenters was saying it was grab your coats, go home, it's over. But of course that dunk gets a 50, and then I watched three other dunks by him and Zach LaVine, and they all got 50s. And my thoughts when I saw that is like, all right, well, if that's a 50 and these other things are 50, clearly the 50 scale is broken. I kind of view it as the max salary cap for players. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant can all get paid around $20 million a year, but then so can Carmelo Anthony and Amari Stoudemire. Clearly there is a broken scale where, some things should be worth more, but the scale we have doesn't make it such. So that being the case, I think Aaron Gordon should have won the slam dunk contest with that. I've never been a big fan of the slam dunk contest. My thoughts a few years back, I actually took down the video to Kurz. I think I meant to migrate it, but I made a video with my brother a few years back where I gave a kind of an op-ed on it. And my general thought is YouTube killed the need for the slam dunk contest, where the slam dunk contest is kind of impressive. You retweeted some love on this, Brian. I made a tweet about Klay Thompson winning the three-point contest above Steph Curry. And my thought was, it was a Bruce Lee quote where Bruce Lee talks about breaking board exhibitions, and his famous line is "boards don't fight back." It's the same thing in a three-point contest. You're trying to shoot really fast, but you don't have people defending, you don't have people passing you the ball. It's not the same, and the slam dunk contest to me is the same. Watching one of my favorite dunks of all time is Ty Lawson splitting the Los Angeles Lakers D and basically dunking on two 7-footers. It's an amazing dunk. I'll see if I remember it for the links. If not, and that to me is kind of the point where in the All-Star game in the dunk contest, you really cannot replicate the coolness of in-game dunks, some of which are truly spectacular. Blake Griffin, he's on hiatus at the moment, but he is the king of in-game posterizing dunks. And then additionally, sorry about that. And then additionally, it's worth noting the origin of the slam dunk contest is from the ABA. And in the ABA, the reason they added the slam dunk contest is the ABA was such a badly run organization. It's amazing it lasted as long as it did, but they didn't have enough teams to really field a proper All-Star game. So what they did is they said we're going to have the All-Stars play the Denver Nuggets because the Denver Nuggets had the best record in the NBA or ABA that season at the time of the All-Star game, and then they added a slam dunk contest. So the ABA added a slam dunk contest because they couldn't put on a proper All-Star game, and it's kind of odd that it's persisted. And like I said, YouTube has in my opinion made it a relic. But even that said, even if we're going to take it that way, the fact that Aaron Gordon didn't win it, I think a few years back, I'm trying to remember, it might have been JaVale McGee, somebody did like a 3-dunk thing. The most creative dunks don't seem to win, and then these kind of boring looking dunks win. And you mentioned that the comments are, well, they're technically more difficult. And this to me is
so that was Desmond Mason on the Doug Gottlieb radio show, who won the contest once, finished second to Jason Richardson as well, considered a great dunker about 10 years ago. Anyway, he just thought the between the legs from the free throw line dunk by Levine was more difficult than the under the legs off the mascot, but just, another opinion.
My Twitter feed does not seem to indicate that people give a lick as to anything Levine did as much as that Aaron Gordon dunk. So
I enjoyed the Gordon dunk more to myself.
What you gonna do? I mean, don't really care much beyond that. But that was my thoughts on Aaron Gordon. Figured I'd give a little bit more love. And then, actually, it's interesting. You put a Reddit post up, and so Reddit disagrees with Steve Goldstein, is what you're saying, or they disagree with the high jump?
They're a bunch of haters anyway. But no, it's mostly the high jump. So let me bring this back up. I was showing a while ago. So the top rated comment from that link. So let's see. Let's attribute everyone here. So the guy who originally posted to Reddit is Jay Carmona 24, and this is our NBA subreddit, of course. And then this top rated comment, Mason is the shit. I guess he's talking about Desmond Mason. I don't know. Maybe some other Mason. He says, as a track and field athlete, I sort of feel like I have to say this, but no, he wouldn't have, meaning gotten the bronze medal. They measure the 7'7" at his butt when his legs are clearly inches lower. For the high jump, to count, you have to contort your entire body over the bar. You can't just go by 1 point. So that's a great point. For the high jump, you get, the skill of clearing the bar is more important than just jumping high in a lot of cases.
I will say we made a mistake a few years back when I was writing at Wages of Wins, where a football player said I think they could have taken Usain Bolt in a sprinting contest, and we said or at the combine or something, and we made a comment on it. And we just did some simple math, and a bunch of track and field people did the same thing. They came to the comments and said, the acceleration matters, and you don't know. And so I will say if you like sports one way and you kind of try and compare to other sports and you don't know all the ins and outs, you can get yourself in trouble quick. So I guess, I'll actually trust Reddit here. That's a cool tweet from Goldstein that you mentioned, but as I mentioned, that just flew across my radar. I have no knowledge of really track and field or high jumps beyond what I've, basic stuff I've seen. So I think I'll probably have to agree with that. Still, my opinion as a basketball fan is Aaron Gordon should have won the dunk contest.
It was hell entertaining. Also, the 360 hoverboard, grab the ball from the mascot was kind of cool. I like that one.
That was interesting. It would have been funnier if the hoverboard had burst into flames. But what are you going to do?
Funny or tragic, same thing. Just one more thing on that. My doctor actually said this to me today. The same thing as this third highest comment on Reddit, which is, he got some lift from pushing off the ball. So I don't know if you noticed that, Dre. He kind of pushed when he got up there. I don't know if that actually gives you extra help or not.
I don't know if we're going to do much wrestling talk today, even though we have on the last couple of shows had at least one segment dedicated to WWE. But I was going to say, if you watch professional wrestling, that's a lot of the trickery is, when it looks like someone gets thrown really high or thrown to the mat really hard, a lot of the trickery is, they push off the other person to ensure help. So, we got to give Aaron Gordon some love there for being a top performer. Anyway, we've talked long enough about that. All I can say is Aaron Gordon, you're our boy this year. You've made the BSG top 10 list a few times. You're one of Brian's all-stars. You're who I think should have won the slam dunk contest. I think you're underrated, and I have been impressed to see what he's done this year. All right.
Oh, just my final thought on that. Okay, let's move on.
Okay, no, actually, I got to give you the final thought. We've done the one more thing 4 times. So I'll let you do the one more thing one last time.
No, the moment's passed, Trey. Let's move on.
All right, I got to give you credit. You do never. I'll give you the mic sometimes, and you won't take it even after it's been offered. So much
Show
love
must
for
go
that.
on.
All right, so Chris Paul. This is just kind of funny. I do the BSG top 10 every week where I look for, the top 10 box scores. And won't lie, this week I went looking for at least one All-Star game one because obviously last week was cut short. And this week's going to be short too. So I really hope there's some really good basketball games between Thursday and Sunday. Otherwise, the list will be kind of interesting next week as well. But I went looking and I found, obviously Chris Paul's, I think, 16 assists. I think 14-point game kind of caught my eye. It wasn't anything too amazing, except when I started digging into it, what I basically discovered is 16 assists in the All-Star game is like the 4th highest, basically behind John Stockton and Magic Johnson. That this was a back-to-back. He got 15 assists last season and 16 assists this season, which now he's the only player other than Magic Johnson to have back-to-back 15 assist games in the All-Star game. 14 assists, Oscar Robertson actually jumps in. And as you can tell from all the stuff I'm rattling off, I ended up researching assists in the All-Star game way longer than I thought I would. And one of my kind of rules with doing kind of fun sports stuff is if I find I've spent a lot of time on something, I should probably turn it into an article because otherwise that work just goes to nothing. So that became Monday's post where I basically said CP3's got, kind of an amazing stretch assist-wise going. He's the only player in All-Star history. This kind of makes me happy. Assists are recorded all the way back to the 50s. There are a lot of stats that we're missing in, NBA history, box scores, etc. Whenever we bring up triple doubles, Oscar Robertson isn't really noted as much as Jason Kidd or Magic Johnson, and that's just because the stats aren't there. Quadruple doubles, Wilt Chamberlain isn't listed just because we have no way of proving it. But we actually have assists all the way back to all of the All-Star games, and so Chris Paul is one of the most prolific passers in the All-Star game. He's now number 2, I believe, 106 assists career to Magic Johnson's 127, and the only player with 7 double-digit ones. And he's got a streak going. He's got 6 consecutive seasons of double-digit assists. Magic Johnson did that as well. In 6 seasons, Magic Johnson put up 100 assists in the All-Star game, including a record that's yet to be broken, 22 assists in one All-Star game. So I don't think Chris Paul is going to break that 100 in 6 seasons. I certainly don't think he's going to break Magic Johnson's 22-1. But if he keeps going another couple seasons like this, Chris Paul will be the all-time All-Star assister. And, part of that's just because Magic Johnson's career got cut short. But regardless, Chris Paul's one of our favorites around here. We think he's perpetually underrated. I think it's 2009. He definitely deserved MVP. One of the things I was doing this year is, for those of you that don't know, the points over par wins produced metric, the way it works is you take a player's raw productivity using, the values we've assigned to each box score statistic. It's the only one publicly available out there that actually uses smart science to do it. Things like PER and efficiency and other ones are kind of iffy. Anyway, and then you compare them against league average to point guards or shooting guards or power forwards or centers. Future, we're actually looking at maybe making that a little less granular, just doing point guards, wings, and bigs. But regardless, an important distinction in the NBA is you have to compare position because the responsibilities of a point guard are different than the responsibilities of a big. And typically the responsibilities of a big, that it's to be close to the hoop, which means you're going to get more assists, you're going to get easier shots. And, it kind of be like in baseball comparing pitchers' batting efficiency to, your 4th batter, cleanup batter's batting efficiency. It doesn't make sense. They have different responsibilities. So that being said, it's very rare to have guards that have raw productivity that's not graded against other guards as high as bigs. And basically, Steph Curry this season and Chris Paul, I believe in 2009, managed to do that, where basically their numbers made them look like a big, even though they're a point guard. And that that is freaking remarkable. So, the All-Star game doesn't mean much. After the All-Star game, LeBron James came out and said his record of having the most career points in All-Star game history doesn't mean anything. And he's right? This is a meaningless game for the most part. But that being said, it lets us get an excuse to give Chris Paul a little more love.
Yeah, for sure. And one of our posters here, I'll bring this up right now, said Chris Paul is pretty underrated. You just said that, but I think career-wise, he's already passed Steve Nash and Jason Kidd. And I was like, wow, I don't know about that. Steve Nash, maybe. Jason Kidd, I'm not sure. But looking at it, I've got Chris Paul's numbers up right here. I think he might be right. Chris Paul has had some amazing seasons.
Do you have so on the tools tab at boxscoregeeks.com, go to the top, there's tools. We have the player comparison engine. I'm assuming you're there, but I'm just talking through this for
our listeners. I've got only Chris Paul, but we can let's do all three of these
so
guys.
I mean, if we actually do, let's do this together. Let's compare Jason Kidd. Oh, I got to do career. Sorry. So you click career first, so then all the players show up, and then you can add Jason Kidd and Steve Nash, etc. So I'm trying to do that right now. I am failing. I'm not being clutch here, Brian.
Now, actually, I don't want to expose Boxscore Geeks, but I don't think you can do historical players in the comparison.
Oh, engine. You are mistaken, sir.
Oh, show me how.
I can give you a link in the script. I'm putting it below that Reddit post. So there it is, Brian. But so I just hopped and compared career-wise Chris Paul, Jason Kidd, Steve Nash. The trick, by the way, listener and Brian, is that you actually have to get career up first and hit compare, because the drop-down is populated based on the season. So obviously, since Steve Nash and Jason Kidd aren't playing the season, they're not going to show up in the 2016 drop-down. Now, career wins produced. We have Chris Paul at 179.5, which does pass Steve Nash's career 178.1, but he's got a ways to go to pass to pass Jason Kidd, who has 257 career wins. It is worth noting, though, that Chris Paul's per minute wins per 48 now is 0.323. That's 3 times as good as an average point guard. Jason Kidd ended his career at 0.25, but it is worth noting that Jason Kidd, of course, that includes all of his declining seasons in New York and Dallas, where he was still a very productive player, but not himself. So, if Chris Paul just follows the normal age curve, he will easily pass Jason Kidd, but he's not there yet.
Yeah, and Chris Paul looks amazing here. Better assist to turnover ratio than either Kidd or Nash, who we both think are 2 all-time greats. Steals is the big one. He's got so many steals, known as being a great defender, always Chris Paul. And we can look at shooting a little bit too here. All these guys are pretty good.
One thing I'll say, Steve Nash is just freaking ridiculous on
60% career true shooting, Dre. That's really tough for a guard.
And then check that out, 42.8% career three-point shooting. I mean, geez, Steve Nash man, what an amazing shooter.
So Paul, not the shooter all around, but he still is at 57.7 career true shooting, not chopped liver exactly. And that's because he gets to the line so much and is such a good free throw shooter.
And he's above, what we should notice on both Chris Paul and Steve Nash is they're above 50% from 2, which is the cutoff you need to be productive. And he's a 36.6% three-point shooter. And then, as you mentioned, he gets to the line a lot. He gets 6.8 free throw attempts per 48. That's his entire career. So, I'm sure you can just actually click on Chris Paul if you've done the comparison, like we said. We'll include that link in the show notes. But, if you look at Chris Paul's, free throw attempts, in 2014, he was up to 7.6 per 48. So that's pretty remarkable. He's kind of had an off season the last 2 years, but he looks like he's coming back. So who's to say?
Yeah, absolutely a great player. He's made some deep playoff runs with not a lot of help. Of course, DeAndre Jordan is great. Blake Griffin has been great at times, but pretty thin otherwise on a lot of those Clipper teams.
Well, I mean, it's so rough because, what are you supposed to say, to like Karl Anthony Towns is an example where, Karl Anthony Towns wins the skills contest, and going into the All-Star break, he put up, he made the BSG top 10 list this week, but like a 32 or 35 point, 13 rebound, 3 block game. He's absolutely tearing it up. And, he's not going to do anything in the playoffs for like 2 seasons at bare minimum. And he might have to get traded before he does anything. And it's so unfair when you compare, Kobe, who had a team of people that was pushing for him to get to Los Angeles that, had just acquired Shaq. And even before acquiring Shaq, had been a good team. So, it's really rough to new players, especially ones that don't have the leverage of kind of more savvy players to say, well, they've never done anything in the playoffs. And you go, well, how the heck were they supposed to do anything in the playoffs? They were drafted by a horrible team, and that team, if they wanted to make money, obviously, if they're willing to go the David Lee route, it's worth noting David Lee going the David Lee route and saying he didn't want to sign a subpar contract with New York, ended up on Golden State with a good contract and actually some deep playoff runs and an NBA ring. But, most players, if they want the money, they pretty much have to stand pat with the team that drafted them for at least a couple more seasons. And that typically means they're not going to do as well as they could. And that's what happened with Chris Paul in New Orleans.
Yeah, maybe when we get Chris Yan, we can revisit that Chris Paul getting rejected to the Lakers by the league situation. That kind of changed the course of history.
That completely. Speaking of trade deadlines and crazy trades, there have been a few blockbuster, I say that somewhat facetiously, trades. Now, here's hoping that come next week, because the trade deadline is the 18th and today is the 16th, so that gives us 2 more days. And there are some big names on the block. Obviously, Dwight Howard's name has started getting thrown around. Hassan Whiteside, of course, because the Heat, if they don't think they can get him back and think they can get anything for him. So there have been a few trades. Basically, the 2 that have gone down are Tobias Harris going to the Detroit Pistons in exchange for Ersan Ilyasova and Brandon Jennings. And then Courtney Lee, I hate multi-team trades, but let's see if I can get everything, Brian. Courtney Lee is going from Memphis to Charlotte, which is good. And then in exchange, Charlotte is giving back PJ Hairston and I believe Brian Roberts.
So PJ Hairston's going to the Grizzlies. Brian Roberts is going to the Heat. We've got it up.
And then Chris Anderson is going to Memphis.
Yeah, so 2 second-round picks from the Heat is also going to Memphis.
So so let's talk this trade first, because in my opinion, it's the most important. If we take a look at Courtney Lee, he's actually a very productive player, and he's never been star, but he has been a productive player pretty much his entire career. We're talking a wins per 48, a little over 0.1, and he's hit that 1.4 kind of ceiling, which is where he's at this season, which is good, not great. And then something else that's kind of worth noting is that he's actually a 3-point shooter. Like, he can actually shoot from threes. Like, he doesn't do a ton, but he takes about 4.4, to 5 3-point shots per 48 and, connects on somewhere between 37 and 40% around the last 3 seasons. So this is, on a team that really doesn't have a lot of outside shooting in the Memphis Grizzlies. This is kind of a shocking move. And the only thing I can kind of give it is if they think their season is up with the injury to, Marc Gasol, which another funny thing is this season, the Memphis Grizzlies are currently 5th in the West right now with a 31-22 record. And I'm trying to fly too fast, Brian, but if you take a look, I believe Marc Gasol has been kind of sucky this season.
I think so, but yeah, so you're saying like him being out for the season maybe helps them a little bit? I don't know.
I'm not saying it helps him. I'm just saying, yeah, actually, according to our numbers, him being out, in theory, makes them slightly better per game. It actually gives them, about 3 points per 48 minutes this season. And I guess the one quick thing to check, so I'm going to the Memphis Grizzlies page, Zach Randolph is, he was a star. He's definitely gotten older. He's playing close to average. Ryan Hollins is actually playing decent, but in, limited minutes. I'm trying to look for any other bigs, and it does look like pretty much they are kind of weak in terms of big positions. Marc Gasol has been getting a lot of minutes. They don't really have a lot of other centers, although they do, for the record, have Brandon Wright on roster, and this is one of those players we've said is great. Just give him minutes. He's great. Just give him minutes, and of course he's gotten a grand total of 120 minutes, which equates to fewer than 3 complete NBA games. So I would even argue with that, with Marc Gasol going down, if they're willing to give Brandon Wright minutes and, kind of play Zach Randolph and Ryan Hollins, just separate the other bigs, they could actually improve. So I don't really understand why you would take one of your most productive players, because I believe Courtney Lee he's their 3rd most productive player behind Mike Conley, who luckily bounced back, Beginning of the season, that was one of our discussions where he was their star player and wasn't playing well. And, Matt Barnes, who, we've in past said that he was more important to the Lakers at points than Kobe. So, they've got an age squad, they've got a beat up squad, but I still think this team is a playoff team. And, if you're in that fourth, fifth seed range, you can potentially go deep. They've done it in the past where some key bounces, some lucky injuries have helped them over the hump. So I don't understand why you'd give up on Courtney Lee this early.
Yeah, it's tough to figure out. And I was trying to read a little bit more into their thinking and didn't get too far. But, Mario Chalmers has been decent per minute this season, although he hasn't played a lot of minutes. Same with Tony Allen, although at his age, who knows when he's going to go down or not. But
well, yeah, Tony Allen is one of those, Tony Allen, Zach Randolph, and Marc Gasol, these three players that in past seasons were just stars that drove that team. And this season, the best we're getting is Zach Randolph, who's playing a little above average.
Can't run away from that age curve, Dre, unfortunately. It's brutal.
Well, I mean, what's funny is we just brought up a chart with, Jason Kidd and Steve Nash. So I guess some people can, but they can't. And the best I can figure out with Courtney Lee, this is the only assumption I have, so I just looked him up on Basketball Reference, is he does have an expiring deal. So his contract is up this season, and I my only guess is, they kind of talked to him about coming back, and he might say, hey, you know what? I'm actually going to be a commodity. The salary cap's going to go up next season, and you guys have a bunch of money. I'd assume, I'm actually going to try and look this up quickly, but I would assume that the Memphis Grizzlies have a bunch of money tied up in those older players. I guess Basketball Insiders is the best place to look. So if that's the case, then I could see Courtney Lee having already kind of tipped his hand and saying, I'm not going to come back to you because I'm $5 million this season, but when the salary cap goes up next season, I could be, a $10 million a year player. I could be productive to another team, especially a competitive team. And in the West right now, you guys aren't going anywhere. Courtney Lee, for the record, he's a player I would, that I think could greatly help out, for instance, Cleveland. So
better than J.R. Smith. Well, maybe they think they could get something out of Chris Anderson. I mean, he's definitely up there in age. He's broken down and injured this year, but if he does actually play, he's still been a good player.
I can't buy for a second they think Chris Anderson. I mean, he might, but I mean, I think his kind of last hurrah, and it was great, by the way, when the Miami Heat picked up Chris Anderson, I was so happy because I loved him in Denver, and he did the loyal thing, which was, I love him for it, but had he gone to Boston in 2009, Boston might win another title with him. But he does the loyal thing. He comes back to Denver. They don't end up going anywhere, in part because he doesn't get a ton of minutes. You could argue his knees just weren't good enough for it. I can't buy he's going to do anything for Memphis. I'm happy to be wrong. But the scary note, I just pulled up Memphis. Even with the new CBA going up, Memphis has invested over $20 million a year in Marc Gasol through 2020, and in 2020 he'll be making $25 million. So even with $100 million salary cap, he's still taking up 25% of it. Easy math there, Brian. And the good news is they have Brandon Wright on for 3 seasons. So if they actually just give Brandon Wright the freaking minutes,
well, do you know what his health situation is like? I don't know if he's healthy or not.
Yeah, actually, what's interesting is even with Marc Gasol next season, they have some sway. So I think it's one of these trying to get something out of nothing. And let's move on to the next trade and discuss the same thing. So the other trade that I'm pretty mad on is Tobias Harris for Brandon Jennings and Ersan Ilyasova. Here's the basic math on that. If you go to Boxscore Geeks, do the comparison engine this season, what you've got is Brandon Jennings is a close to average player who's getting decent minutes. Ersan Ilyasova, close to average player, getting decent minutes. Tobias Harris, close to average player, getting decent minutes. This isn't hard math. You take 2 average players, you trade them for 1 average player, you lose out in that trade. So I actually think that Orlando wins this trade. In part, also, Tobias Harris is getting paid like $15 million a season. And, even with, we keep bringing up the new salary cap and how it's going to change things. That being said, I'm still not a fan of, like, it's a weird bit of logic to me in salary cap math to say the salary cap's going to go up in 2 seasons and this player won't be overpaid then, so let's overpay them now. It's like, if you can get players on like rookie contracts, for example, now, why not do that? And I believe Ersan Ilyasova has 1 more year on his contract for a reasonable rate. So I actually really love this deal for Orlando. In part, also, I think they still have like Channing Frye on staff, so I would much prefer Ersan to Channing Frye. They're the same type of player, this shooting stretch 4 or whatever. So Ersan's definitely an upgrade there. And, I think you mentioned one of the reasons they kind of moved Tobias Harris is they wanted to get more minutes for Aaron Gordon. So, I love this trade, right? You get a decent point guard, a stretch for more minutes for your star player right now. That's fantastic for Orlando. For Detroit, they give up two decent players for one decent player that's more expensive. So I'm not a fan of this. Now, the logic you can hear is Tobias Harris's ceiling is higher, which is probably true. He's 23 years old, which, and Ersan Ilyasova is 28. So Ersan, he's probably peaked. Tobias Harris probably has upwards to go, but Tobias Harris hasn't done anything to impress me yet. And if we kind of think he's going to do the same this season, then Detroit has really hurt themselves a little this season for the hope that they'll get better in the future. And I think they have the same logic maybe as the Memphis Grizzlies, which is Brandon Jennings' contract is up at the end of the season. They're probably not going to be able to resign him for an affordable rate. So their logic is we don't want to lose Brandon Jennings for, and this is the quote I'm going to use and what I've been harping on in our emails back and forth, Brian, is we don't want to lose him for nothing. So we're going to upgrade Ersan Ilyasova to Tobias Harris instead of losing Brandon Jennings for nothing. It might be the same case on the Memphis Grizzlies. We don't want to lose Courtney Lee for nothing, so we're going to trade Courtney Lee for future draft picks and, one decent player. But the issue I have with the logic of losing a player for nothing is the Memphis Grizzlies, as I mentioned, are in the playoff hunt. They're actually in one of the best spots. It's worth noting that out west, if you make it to the second round, we're talking the Warriors and the Spurs, who are currently two of the best teams in NBA histories, according to the number. Best teams in NBA history, according to the numbers right now. We're talking the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have two All-Stars, two MVPs right now. I never thought I would be saying that Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant are both MVP candidates, but they are. The second round is going to be brutal no matter who you are, but they actually stand in line to actually get to that second round. So I don't see why either team, the Detroit Pistons, who are on the playoff hunt, they're ninth seed right now, but I think only half a game back, or the Memphis Grizzlies, who are the fifth seed, which is, about as favorable a seed as you can get. You're not going to get any better because as soon as you get to the second round, you're kind of screwed. I don't see why either of them are basically giving up productive players who can help them in that hunt for the hope of future stuff, when what you're basically hoping for in the future is players that'll help you in the playoff hunt in the future. This has always baffled me about the NBA, is people ignoring this year's playoffs as important. And we talked this a little pre-show. Here's some funny logic that gets me. If I tell you a team is tanking, I can tell you just point blank, look, even if your team tanks, even if your team wins the draft lottery, even if your team gets a favorable pick, first off, they're unlikely to win the draft lottery. Even if you're the worst team in the NBA, the 76ers have a 25% chance of getting the number one pick right now. And that's being just they're so horrible they make the Lakers look good. So there's that. Even if they get the number one pick, the odds of that number one pick turns out well are still low. I mean, take into account Blake Griffin is allegedly on the trading block right now and is out injured and has had injuries throughout his career that have probably limited him, despite the fact that he has touched on greatness several times. So it's like you have very sketch odds at ending up with a superstar that's going to change your fortune, even if you're in the best scenario for tanking. But teams will say that's a good strategy. But then you tell them, hey, you're going to make the playoffs. You could actually go far. And they go, oh, we're not beating the Spurs. We're not beating the Cavaliers. We're not beating the Warriors. And what I can say to that is, in recent history, we've had Derrick Rose go down injured on the Bulls and had a number one seed fall. We've had Manu Ginobili go down on the Spurs. Did I say Spurs both times? I think I meant to say Bulls with Derrick Rose, obviously. So Derrick Rose on the Bulls, Manu Ginobili on the Spurs, Russell Westbrook on the Thunder. Last season, even the Cavaliers, they were kind of both sides of this. They overperformed and almost took down a much better Warriors team, but then they also lost some star players in Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. So we have seen a history of injuries in the playoffs and upsets in the playoffs to say your odds aren't great, but you have a chance of making an upset in the playoffs and going far and turning into the 1999 New York Knicks with Marcus Camby that went all the way to the finals. You stand a chance of doing that. And people look at you like, oh, that's crazy. But then they come back at you and tell you they think they have a shot of ending up with a star player in the draft lottery, when we can look at history and say your odds aren't that great there.
Yeah, I love how you tied all that together. And I hate to be the cold, calculating capitalist here, Dre, but the money does matter, right? So I love your point on how Detroit takes, that Tobias Harris trade. All those players aren't going to make a difference, really. There's guys at the end of their bench or in the D League that can probably be as good as those players. Maybe Tobias Harris will play up to that contract, but probably not, right? He has to improve a lot just for it to be an okay contract. So, meanwhile, they're likely stuck with this big contract. And then here's the other thing I want to ask you about. Now, I'll put you on the spot, Dre. Hasn't there been some research into the financial benefit of an NBA team for making the playoffs, right? They're going to sell tickets. Their players get playoff shares, right? Get paid more, but the teams themselves make money from getting to the playoffs too, right?
So the best we've seen is when Deadspin got the leaked Nets financials when the Nets were going through a while back. Basically, the numbers, and this was years ago. That's what's worth noting. This is before the new contract deal. And this was the Nets, who weren't at the time. It didn't appear that they were very popular. That was what was very odd. The Nets were in a good market, but didn't have a good return on the market.
Was this before they built the new stadium?
Yes, this was before the new stadium and kind of before some of the popularity, although who knows when they'll be popular again. But so the point is the Nets were in a good market but didn't have a good, demand. Whereas like the Charlotte Bobcats are the opposite. They're in a horrible market but have great demand, but the reality is you always want to be in the better market. They basically showed numbers that seemed to indicate they would get about $1 to $2 million for home playoff game. And as Patrick has pointed out, the way we pay NBA players, because not every team makes the playoffs, is you just pay them for the regular season, and the extra money they make for making the playoffs is peanuts compared to the normal salary, right? If LeBron James is making $20 million a season, then making a couple extra 100,000 if he makes it all the way through the playoffs is obviously nothing. So it is huge for a team to make the playoffs. It's just free money. And this is one reason why we always talk about strikes and lockouts and say if players really wanted to hit the owners where it hurts, they would strike during the playoffs because that's just taking money out of the owners' pockets. Whereas if they wait for the regular seasons, the owners freeze them out, then it's coming out of the players' pockets because they just do what they've done every lockout, which is they just have a condensed season. They, basically don't pay the players as much. So yeah, the playoffs is just free money. And so like every home playoff game you get is over $1 million. I can only assume that's gone up with television revenue and such. So it's bizarre to me, like with what you're saying, which is teams go, I don't have a shot at winning the title, so I may just give up on the season. And why that drives me nuts is most teams don't have a shot at winning a title. In any given season, there are, 3-4 teams, I would argue. I'm willing to bet if you go through NBA history, you can start at the beginning of the year. And I think if you ask a decently savvy person at the beginning of the year, which teams legitimately have a shot at winning a title, and then which teams are a potential breakout, and you limited them to 5, I'd be willing to bet, this is hard. We can't really backfill this because we know what happened. I'd be willing to bet that like the championship team was always in that 5. Maybe with the exclusion of the Houston Rockets in 1995. Yeah, 1995. But even then, they had just won the title, so people would still be listing them even though they had gotten worse. So that's what bugs me, is that most teams can't win a title, but every team can benefit from the playoffs, just making money. It's worth noting, too, that having a winning team makes you want to go see your team. Even if they don't go all the way to the finals, if your team's in the playoffs, that's more fans coming to playoff games. That's more fans getting to hear the spiel about buying season tickets. That's more fans buying paraphernalia. That is a good thing for your franchise. So it's always so weird to me to have so many people go, let's just give up on the season. We're not winning a title. And I go, or even go, let's just give up on the season. At best, we're going to be an 8th seed. We'd rather be in the draft lottery. And I go, look, your odds of getting a star in the draft lottery are really low, just like your odds of, winning in the playoffs are really low. But guess what? You make a few $1 million just by getting to the playoffs. Whereas, yeah, you get a player at a discounted contract in the draft lottery, but it's worth noting, I think I've talked about this before, the best contracts in the NBA are basically late first rounders. Because of how the draft scale works, basically people that are picked closer to number 1 get paid more, and then it goes down and down and down until you get to the end of the first round. And then at the end of the first round, the issue becomes they're only 2-year deals where you have the player's bird rights, but if a player goes off like Jeremy Lin or Carlos Boozer or Gilbert Arenas, they basically get a pay bump, even though they've done some rule changes, so you can't quite get the Carlos Boozer, Gilbert Arenas deals of past. It is still more expensive to have a second round player that goes off like Draymond Green than it is to have a late first round player that goes off. So it's so bizarre to me to see people not get that. Basically, you would rather be the eighth seed in the playoffs and hope for a Derrick Rose injury than hope to get a slightly marginal improved chance of getting the number one pick.
Yeah, just to spell it out a little bit more, it's not just about, making money for the owner to pocket, although he could if he wants to. But cash in the NBA directly leads into assets. Like, we've seen teams buy first round draft picks. Yeah, I mean, that's not insignificant. You're not hurting your, resources at all when you try to go for the playoffs. But one thing you said in there was funny that made me think of a story, which is that how the playoff share that the players make is insignificant compared to their contracts. But you hear from former players that they really, really care about that kind of stuff. So I would think that, if owners are trying to tank and not make the playoffs, that should piss off the players that they're showing them the money. The great example I can think of is former NBA player and now broadcaster Tom Tolbert, who's here in the Bay Area, does some work for the Warriors, also does some work for national broadcasts. He used to say that when players would get their meal per diem for the road games, even though it was whatever, $50, $100 back in those days, I don't remember the exact number, like you said, peanuts compared to the real salaries. The players love that per diem. They love getting that free little extra bit of money. So, psychology matters here for stuff like that.
That is, I mean, I bring up Dan. It seems like I'm on a streak. I don't know if I've done it every show, but
example.
I bring up Dan Ariely all the time, and one of his favorite experiments is free as a number and how weird it is. So like the experiment is you have two chocolates and you basically say you can buy like a Lindor truffle for a quarter or you can buy a Hershey Kiss for a penny. And most people go with the Lindor truffle basically because they recognize it's a superior chocolate. And by the way, 25 cents for that is a fantastic deal. And then what ends up happening, though, is you can buy a Lindor truffle for, a quarter, or you can get a free Hershey's Kiss, and people flock to that free. And, I used to work retail. I used to work in Target, and I would see this all the time where, just people would irrationally go for bad deals just because, they were free or 75% off or whatever. So that said, it's a funny, like you're saying, funny bit of psychology where you can tell the player, look, you're making $20 million a season, and the smart move is, invest that in this and get annuities and whatever, and that'll make them less excited than being like, you're going to make an extra $100 because we're going on the road for 3 days and we're giving you per diem. So that's kind of fun.
So I'll give the Pistons credit on one hand. They're saying, okay, we're going to take on more salary to get this guy, Tobias Harris, who we think is a better player. So they are trying to win and make the playoffs. They just made the wrong talent evaluation, right?
Yeah, I will give you that as true. There was a great documentary or ESPN. I saw a show on the history of the Houston Rockets, and they brought up the Tracy McGrady trade, and it was either a coach or someone in the front office that said, his metric for trades is whichever team gets the better player wins the trade, regardless. So and in the NBA, that's not a bad metric because there are trades that I could give you for, say, LeBron James, where in theory I give you more wins than LeBron James is worth or whatever. But LeBron James himself is a star. That's worth so much more because you can replace average players. Even if I trade an average player for LeBron and lose 5 wins, I can go buy 5 wins on the free market. I can't buy a LeBron James on the free market. So there's something to it. So if their logic is Tobias Harris is an up-and-coming star and Ersan Ilyasova is a serviceable role player, their logic is they're upgrading. And there's something to that, but I don't. I'm just not sold on it. Based on his first 5 years of production, I'm not seeing it. I'm happy to be wrong. Right? This could be a Zach Randolph scenario where he does take off. Who knows? I mean, the Detroit Pistons have Andre Drummond, who we were never that high on. So, they're ripe to prove us wrong again. So I can see the logic behind the trade, but just going on my numbers and my take on, don't view losing Brandon Jennings for nothing as nothing when you're in a playoff race. If you're in a playoff race, there is no such thing as not getting a player back. This is one of my biggest pet peeves with Andre Iguodala and the Nuggets. So many people say, the Nuggets, bet the farm on Andre Iguodala. They traded all these assets for Andre Iguodala and they got nothing in return. They got a franchise record wins and their best shot at going deep in the playoffs. The fact that they didn't capitalize on it is not their fault.
Yeah, for sure.
Or not Andre Iguodala's fault. Sorry. It was
right.
their fault.
Nothing's Andre Iguodala's fault. He's perfect. But no, let's before we move on to the fake trades, just one last thing on these real trades. I had to bring up this real GM analysis here. that I got to rip Real GM real fast. They said with Detroit adding Tobias Harris, Charlotte couldn't afford to stand pat. So I, I don't know about that. I don't think it's going to affect either team
Charlotte,
that much.
especially since let's bring up the Dwight Howard
Is
trade
that
next.
possible though? Like Detroit scared Charlotte into getting Courtney Lee? I don't know.
I mean, the Courtney Lee trade, which I think we discussed, right? Courtney Lee is the best player in that trade. Um, from my opinion, if Charlotte had that offer, I would just go, yeah, of course. I mean, that's what's also interesting is trading 2 second rounders for a productive, cheap NBA player
Yeah, for sure.
is always worth it. That's always what's bizarre to me is people thinking that like this draft pick is this amazing asset. And you go, if you go to the draft lottery to spend that draft pick, odds are what you're going to end up with is a below average player who flames out in 4 seasons. Whereas if you just spend that second round pick on an above average player now, it's probably going to help you out. Don't do the 76ers route of spending on a player you already waived who is horrible, but what are you going to do? So I don't. If Charlotte was scared into making a good move, well, okay, but that was just a good move on its own. I say Charlotte so far is winning the trade deadline. And the other trade I want to bring up that we haven't heard anything yet, but Dwight Howard is on the trading block. And
Oh no, just real fast to finish this up before we get to that though. All I'm saying on this is I doubt that they called him up. The Grizzlies called Charlotte and like, hey, we'll give you Courtney Lee for some random players, and they're like, nah, I think we're fine. Then all of a sudden they're looking through Twitter and they see this Detroit Tobias Harris trade go, and they're like, oh my god, we got to dial them up real fast to make this trade because we saw Tobias Harris. That's all I'm saying.
I think the only reason they said that in the Real GM article is because the Charlotte Hornets are 8th and the Detroit Pistons are 9th in the standings right
exactly. Now. But anyway, let's talk Dwight Howard.
Not much to talk actually, except that his name is on the market, and we might write about this a little in the future. But what's fascinating to me about the Houston Rockets is, this season they've kind of gone into a tailspin, and the reality is Daryl Morey really lucked into getting James Harden and Dwight Howard, and getting those two players should have been enough to leapfrog him to greatness. And arguably they did have a really good playoff run last season. But if you look at the rest of that team, it's so much of it is garbage. Corey Brewer, Josh Smith. Some credit, Terrence Jones looked great 2 seasons ago and now looks horrible. And Ty Lawson I thought was a bold pickup and now looks terrible. But they didn't really surround that core of players, those core 2 players, as weird as that sounds, with a bunch of great players. And now they're kind of on the down slump, and now they're saying time to move on, time to rebuild. And the point is, they're not going to get an upgrade to Dwight Howard. Like, there's no team that's going to go, oh, you give us Dwight Howard, we'll give you an upgrade. The one name in contention is Hassan Whiteside, and that'll be interesting. Which, I mean, I guess would be an upgrade, but then gets you into a weird scenario of if he wants to resign and can go elsewhere and all that jazz. So it's really fascinating to watch that. And Charlotte is one name that's being linked with Dwight Howard. So if Charlotte, by the way, got Courtney Lee and Dwight Howard for, if they give up Al Jefferson, that would be fine.
I've seen Boston as well.
Boston's fascinating because they have a lot of really good bigs. They got Sullinger,
Amir Johnson.
They got Amir Johnson. I mean, I wouldn't.
Not David Lee for long, apparently.
David, but I mean, that was not to be mean to David Lee. That was kind of known, I would assume, right? Like, he had to have known his contract is going to be one of the most coveted for a team looking to shed salary at the end of the season. So, I just, whatever happens with Dwight Howard, I really hope he's traded, whatever happens with Dwight Howard, because I want to laugh at the trade, because it's going to be lopsided in one way or another. And, the only real trade I could see happening that I would go, that makes sense, would be if he was traded for Hassan Whiteside. And it's also worth noting, it's also worth noting right now that, Chris Bosh may be out for the season with blood clots again. So I don't know the Heat's mentality right now, or their willingness to pull a trigger. So I just think it's funny with Dwight Howard, and I don't want to go on the same exact tirade, but same logic with the Rockets, which is they're in the playoff hunt right now. You don't want to give up on the season. Dwight Howard's a star player. He's not the same player he was, but he's still shown, even this season, he's had some 20-20 games. That's 20 points, 20 rebounds. He's shown the capacity to go off. So if Dwight Howard is able to go off in the playoffs, he could steal you a series. So I wouldn't give up on him unless they get an absolutely killer deal for him. And, I don't think getting like a mediocre player and like 4 picks is a reasonable trade for Dwight Howard. And if a team like Charlotte was able to do that, I'd say good on them, and they say that they've improved their playoff chances.
Yeah, and supposedly, I don't know if it's here in this Zach Lowe article that I'm linking or somewhere else, but supposedly the Rockets are asking for a lot for him. So that's good at least. It looks like they're not just going to trade him for nothing. But, Lowe's kind of overall point is that there aren't a lot of good fits, that very few teams can try to compete with the Warriors or Spurs. He throws the Cavs and Thunder in there also. And he thinks that there aren't any teams that could add Howard and move themselves up into that category of being to compete. So that's why he thinks.
First off, I hate that logic.
Just like you were saying with the other trades, right, Dre?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like if your logic is we got to be able to compete with X team, that's stupid. If your logic is we want to improve our team because improving our team improves our chances, that's the right logic. So the bigger point to Dwight Howard is the way the NBA trade works is that if you're above the cap, you basically have to match a player's salary within 125%. So if you're trading for a $20 million player, you can't give them like less than 18 million, and you can't give them more than 22 million for the player. So the issue becomes how many teams have expensive players that the Rockets would want that they can give up for Dwight Howard while still remaining competitive? And the answer is not that many. The funny one I brought up was, the Oklahoma City Thunder could offer Enes Kanter for Dwight Howard, and I think that would be a fantastic trade for the Thunder. Horrible trade for the Rockets, but fantastic trade for the Thunder. That'd work. But yeah, not too many teams, like what you're saying, have the assets that would also upgrade their squad to make this trade. That's the problem, is trading for expensive players. It's got to work for both squads. And the reason this doesn't really work is they're not trying to trade Howard because they're overwhelmed at the big position. In fact, they're not. They're really, with Terrence Jones playing horribly and Josh Smith on contract again, they're actually pretty terrible at the big position. Dwight Howard's pretty much what they got. So you want to trade Dwight Howard for another star big that's also expensive, that's going to upgrade both teams. That doesn't tend to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Morey, can you redeem yourself? We'll see.
I gotta say, I mean, especially given the head start he got, James Harden and Dwight Howard were both kind of stupid players that fell into his lap that really had no business doing that, because the reason they fell into his laps is because their other franchises were stupid. The reason Dwight Howard fell into his lap is because the Lakers went, we're going to side with Kobe and give him $50 million instead of re-signing Dwight Howard, which was ridiculous. The reason they got James Harden is that, the Thunder basically didn't want to pay James Harden an extra $4 million a season. So he got lucky on those two and did nothing else. And so, it's very similar to the Clippers, by the way, with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin and even DeAndre Jordan, where you lucked into these players and all you had to do was make decent players around them, and you signed Austin Rivers. One last, just, kind of actually a shout out, not really much to a trade, is the Clippers apparently offered the Nuggets Blake Griffin for everything, and the Nuggets wisely said, no, we're good. So I found that amusing. I don't know what the trade value of Blake Griffin is right now, given that he's injured, given that he's having off-court issues, given that he's been dealing with injuries the last couple of seasons, but clearly it's not as high as the Clippers think.
Yeah, and, Blake Griffin, I guess people kind of overreact about the off the court stuff. Like what did he do? He punched his friend who's the equipment manager on the Clippers, and that's how he broke his hand. So if he had just broken in a game, he'd probably have higher value, which is kind of interesting.
I still like Blake, but yeah, I mean, obviously you're not going to trade like your young, talented players for him, and the trade they were offering was ridiculous. Yeah. So anyway, I got my things out. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, we're hitting about time. I got most of my stuff in. It'll be nice to go back to the NBA being on. I really hope at least one blockbuster deal happens, but it's worth noting in the history of the NBA, usually star players and meaningful trades do not happen midseason. Anybody that brings up like Rasheed Wallace on the Pistons, that's just dumb. That wasn't why they won the title that year. I mean, he helped. He was like the 5th best player on the team. But, the number of Pau Gasol trades is just few and far between, although a couple have happened in the past few seasons. So I'm not expecting anything, but I'm hoping that come next week's show, there is at least one major trade, preferably one with Dwight Howard.
Yeah, and there was a so to sort of contradict what you were saying earlier, in the past, teams have always wanted to try to get these expiring deals, like David Lee, to get the cap room and try to sign players. I feel like I've been reading a little bit that everyone is too overconfident about the cap going up. In fact, one of these articles we had up here, I can't remember which one, said that the estimate's been adjusted even higher, from 89 million to 92 million. So maybe the expiring deal type of trades won't happen as much because of that.
Did you give me the article on like Archie Goodwin and how the new deal is hurting his value, and that's just because
No.
so I think I'll see if I can track it along and send it to you so we can put it on the script notes. But the logic basically was, in most years, having a contract like his would make him a trade asset, but because everybody's sure the CBA is going up, they're not looking for like a cheap asset like him. So that's kind of interesting to what you're saying, where, you know, even David Lee, where, you know, being able to clear a bunch of salary off the books, teams might be going, you know, actually we want to keep some of our better players and just spend the money next season. The next offseason is going to be crazy. That'll be interesting to watch.
Hey, if I'm the Warriors right now, welcome back David Lee. He's going to play better than some of the big men they have right now. The cupboard is bare, Dre.
What? The Warriors? What are you talking about?
They've got Andrew Bogut and Draymond Green, and that's it. Otherwise, it's Mo Spates and a bunch of small forwards.
I mean, I guess that's true, but, you know, Andrew Bogut and Draymond Green seem to be playing great for him. Mo Spates, I think, is the only weak link on that team. So, is what it is. With that said, let's just head to shout-outs, Brian. I got a couple. First off, got to give a huge shout-out to the ladiesleague.org. This is a sports site run by all female bloggers, which is freaking awesome. You know, they've got 4 or 5 really excellent articles up so far. They've got WNBA data. This is, you know, we talk a lot, you know, about inclusion on this podcast, about how we'd like to see more representation, especially for women in sports media. So I could not be happier that this site exists. We're actually hoping to get some of them on for an interview on an upcoming podcast. So fantastic site. Add it to your RSS, theladiesleague.org. They have a really fun one, fun in a weird way, in that Kavitha Davidson, who is someone we really like, who writes for Bloomberg, was on ESPN to discuss Peyton Manning's sexual allegations at Tennessee, and was basically cut off by someone who essentially cut her off multiple times to say, I don't actually know anything, but I have an opinion. So interesting article. Like I said, really enjoyed it. Didn't like it in the sense that I didn't like how Kavitha was treated, but really enjoyed the article's take. So check it out. Great site. No, we'll be shouting it out more in the future. My second one is Adam Blampede, who is over at What Culture, WWE. And he does a lot of great YouTube things on how he would book, or how he would have booked, various wrestling angles. And he gave his How I Would Book WrestleMania 32 recently. It was a 2-parter. It's fantastic. It makes me really sad, actually, because I know WrestleMania 32 is going to fail miserably to live up to, you know, his script. So if you want to at least see what WrestleMania 32 could have been, go check it out, and then we can all be depressed together after it actually happens.
Oh, it's a time for my shouts now. We're showing this What Culture Wrestling video right now. Okay, let's get over to my shout-out. So I've got a few. First, I've got from Iago Colas, Bad Prof on Twitter. He's got an ad from 1892, the YMCA publication Physical Education, advertising for basketball, and comparing it to football. Yeah, the graphic's kind of weird on my display right now. It's not showing the whole thing, but it's showing some guys, you know, wearing no shirts but wearing slacks and belts.
I think, yeah, we were discussing if it was slacks or jeans. I agree with you. I think they are wearing slacks, and I got to assume dress shoes?
Looks like dress shoes. So maybe they weren't quite up on the equipment, but they call basketball a new and popular game. Instead of kicking the ball, toss it. Instead of downs, keep the ball up. That's a clever one right there.
There you go.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe we're coming full circle, and football is starting to take a little bit of heat, but back in the 1892, YMCA had it figured out. So that was kind of a cool link. Let's see what my other shout-outs are here. Okay, here's another good one. You weren't as excited about this, but, you know, one thing I wanted to say about the All-Star Saturday is that it's kind of the first one in a long time that I actually enjoyed. I usually just hate All-Star games, but all all the competitions were interesting. We had Towns, the big man, winning the skills. Of course, the Warriors and the three-point contest, homerism there, and the interesting dunks for the first time in a while. But Kevin Draper wrote before that, he said he wants a one-on-one tournament during the All-Star weekend. I think that would be pretty cool. Put some money on the line, maybe make it fun. I could go for that. That could be
I was
pretty
less
cool.
excited about that in part because I hate the stupid arguments of like who would win a one-on-one between like Steve Nash and Kobe Bryant, and it's like that's not the game, right? The game is a five-person game where passing is important and stuff. So I kind of already hate those narratives, and I gave you a theory when I was looking over all the Chris Paul stuff that one reason I think Isaiah Thomas is rated as highly as he is that he just did really well in All-Star games. That he has 2 All-Star MVPs. So I already kind of hate these stupid narratives, and I just feel a one-on-one would add to it. But maybe I'm just old and out of touch.
No, I mean, you're not wrong. Overall, I'm still not a big fan of the All-Star game. Like, it's just totally different. No intensity, whatever. But we'll get this last shout in here because this is my favorite of them all.
This is awesome.
The top post on the RNBA subreddit today. This is from last_Christmas. And the post is titled, "You can trade the entire Sixers team for Kobe Bryant on ESPN's trade machine." So, yeah, there's a link to it right here. Let's go to it. And, of course, some funny comments, but let's bring up this trade.
It's a hilarious trade where we were talking about how hard it would be to have a win-win trade, trading Dwight because they really need to get a star big back. Trading Kobe for the entire 76ers, talk about a lose-lose trade.
Yeah, I've got to shrink the zoom all the way down just to fit all these guys on my screen. But, yeah, it's pretty funny. And, yeah, we were talking about overpaid players earlier. Kobe Bryant's one of them.
He is the one. All right.
That's all my shout-outs.
I'm going to give one more note, actually. So we had 2 commenters this week in the twitch.tv/nerd numbers chat room when we do go live, obviously, on twitch.tv weekly. Ziano51, and I really hate the font that twitch.tv uses. They use this like green font that makes it really hard to read, but I think it's Ramu. So sorry if I mispronounced that, but I was going to say Ziano51 asks, people still use RSS. My question is what do people use instead of RSS? My RSS reader is still how I keep up to date on all my different feeds. I use Feedly.com. I was really sad when obviously Google Reader went down, but Feedly has been an amazing replacement, and that's how I tend to keep up to date really quick. And as I mentioned to you, Brian, I don't tend to read like 538 stuff in depth, so an RSS reader is kind of key for me to be able to quickly scan everything, and then I use Twitter for up-to-date news. So I'm really curious what people use other than RSS. But anyway, that has been our show. We gave our shout-outs, and anyway, if you found us not through the website, we are on BoxscoreGeeks.com. You can find us on iTunes and Stitcher, the Boxscore Geeks Show. We go live every week, twitch.tv/nerd numbers. You have to follow myself, Nerd Numbers, Patrick Minton, NBA Geek, or Brian Foster, Boxscore Brian on Twitter to know exactly when. It's typically 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. Additionally, we have the recaps of the show on YouTube on channel Nerd Numbers. And finally, if you see a fun box score that you would like me to include in my weekly column, the BSG Top 10, do the hashtag BSG Top 10 and let me know. It might make the article. Thanks so much for watching, and with that, we will see you next week.